A private jet stalled on a quiet runway just minutes before takeoff. The ground crew panicked until an aging mechanic emerged from the fog and crawled beneath the aircraft, risking everything to fix a problem no one else saw. When the door finally opened, the woman inside stepped out and said something that stopped him cold. Before we dive into this unforgettable story of fate, kindness, and second chances, make sure to subscribe if you love emotional, heartwarming stories that just might change the way you see the world. Let's begin. A mechanic saved a stalled plane on the runway. The woman inside said, "I've been looking for you." The early spring sky over Willowridge Regional Airport was bruised with fog and low clouds. Wind swept the flat expanse like a hand brushing dust off a tabletop, and the thin gray light made everything look older than it was. It was 6:13 a.m. when the call came through the radio. "Tower to maintenance, we've got an inbound private jet stalled on runway 2. Possible hydraulic failure. Need immediate eyes on it. Jack, you on this?" Jack Monroe dropped his coffee and grabbed his worn toolbox without replying. He was already halfway to the rusted airport buggy. 52 hair graying at the temple's face, creased like an old flight manual, Jack didn't waste time with chatter. The runway was no place for second guesses. As the buggy tore across the tarmac, the control tower loomed in the haze like a ship in fog. The stalled aircraft came into view, a sleek, charcoal-gray Gulfstream G600 nose angled slightly to the left, as if reluctant to move forward. The jet had stopped halfway through takeoff prep, hazard lights blinking furiously. 2 ground crew members stood nearby, looking lost. Jack pulled up engine sputtering and leapt out. Who's touched what he barked? Nothing yet. We didn't want to good. He slid under the fuselage palms, dragging across cold metal. Years of experience told him not to trust automated diagnostics alone. A situation like this could go from inconvenient to catastrophic in seconds, especially with a fuel-heavy jet and unpredictable weather. Then he saw it. A ruptured hydraulic line was leaking onto a junction valve near the rear gear assembly. A hairline split, but under pressure, it could have locked the landing gear mid-flight. One bump on takeoff and the plane could have skidded off like a rock on a frozen lake. Need a flare nut wrench and a copper patch. "Now," Jack shouted. The younger mechanic scrambled to the buggy, nearly tripping. Jack stayed crouched, hands, steady movements, calm but swift. His breath fogged under the belly of the plane. It reminded him of another time, another mistake. But there was no room for memory now. As the parts arrived, he worked fast, clamped the line, cleaned the joint, patched the valve. The temporary fix would hold just long enough to taxi the plane safely off the runway. "Tell the tower they can clear her in 30 seconds, he said, wiping his hands. "But she's not flying today." The younger crew member stared. "That's it. You just saved a Gulfstream from—" "I didn't save the plane," Jack muttered. "I bought time." Just then the cabin door hissed open. From the sleek interior stepped a woman, mid-40s tall, graceful, wrapped in a camel-colored trench coat despite the chill. Her dark auburn hair was clipped neatly, her heels inappropriate for tarmac, but she walked toward Jack with purpose, as if the runway were a red carpet only she could see. Jack tipped his cap out of habit, about to turn away. But then she spoke. "Wait, are you Jack Monroe?" He froze. Her voice wasn't surprised, it was certain. Her eyes, a deep storm gray, scanned his face like a long-lost photograph come to life. "Yeah," he said slowly, unsure. "That's me." The wind tugged at her coat. The sounds of the airport fell away like a muted reel. She stepped closer, barely a breath away. "I've been looking for you." Jack blinked, searching her face. "Do I know you?" She smiled, but it trembled. "You don't remember. But you changed everything." He stared, silent. "You fixed a van in the snow. You gave me your coat. You told me I was going to be okay when nobody else did." The memory hit him not in words but in sensation. Bitter cold. A coughing engine, a teenage girl shivering in the back seat, blood sugar crashing him kneeling beside the wheel with frostbitten hands. A long time ago. Another life. I never even knew your name, she said softly, until today. Jack looked away, unsure what to say to a ghost that had returned with breath and tears. I'm sorry, he said finally. I didn't think it mattered. It did, she whispered. It still does. Behind them, the jet's engine gave a low whine. The air smelled of oil rain and something like fate. I'm Elena, she said. Elena Whitmore. Jack stiffened. That name, the founder of the Whitmore Foundation. He'd seen it on the news. The face a little younger, a little glossier. A philanthropist. A millionaire. A woman who'd disappeared for 2 years, then returned with more fire than before. And now she was standing in front of him, thanking him for a kindness he'd almost forgotten. Why are you really here? Jack asked. Elena looked him straight in the eyes. Because I need your help again. But this time, not for me. He didn't know what that meant. He only knew one thing: something had shifted. The kind of shift that didn't happen on runways or under engines but inside a man's bones. He didn't believe in miracles, but sometimes he believed in echoes. And this one had just landed. The diner was the kind that hadn't changed since the 70s, all chrome-faded red booths and the faint scent of burned coffee lingering no matter how many times they scrubbed the griddle. Jack sat across from Elena at a corner table, the window fogging slightly from the heat inside. He hadn't been here in weeks, and he only agreed to meet her because she didn't ask twice. She stirred her tea without drinking it, hands graceful but tense. Jack studied her quietly. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. No press, no entourage, no performative elegance. She looked sincere. And for a man who trusted few and forgave even fewer that mattered. You didn't have to say yes. She said at last, her voice softer than it had been on the runway. Jack shrugged. You caught me off guard. I figured the least I could do is hear you out. She smiled, and it was real. Fair enough. The waitress dropped off 2 plates of meatloaf and mashed potatoes, a special Jack didn't remember ordering but probably had out of habit. Elena picked at hers politely, but her mind wasn't on the food. So Jack said, folding his arms, You said I saved you. When she reached into her coat and carefully pulled out a small plastic envelope. Inside was a faded Polaroid edges curling with time. She slid it across the table. Jack picked it up. The photo showed a teenage girl in an oversized parka, his parka standing beside a rusted van. The front hood was up, and behind her was a young man in his 20s, crouched with a wrench in one hand and snow in his beard. Him. He didn't remember the picture being taken. On the back, scribbled in blue pen, were the words, he said the world still had good people. I believed him. Jack looked up stunned. That was back near Rockport, wasn't it, middle of nowhere? That busted van with the hand-painted logo, Grace House. Elena nodded. That was home, or at least what passed for it. She sat straighter as if anchoring herself before revealing more. I was 17. I'd been bounced around the system, foster home shelters, you name it. Grace House was supposed to be my last stop before I turned 18 and aged out. She paused, then continued, voice steady. That winter was brutal. One of the volunteers was supposed to drive me to the health clinic I hadn't eaten in 2 days, and I blacked out from low blood sugar. The van died in the snow 5 miles out. Jack listened in silence. Everyone passed us by, she said, lips tight, except one beat-up pickup truck that pulled over. You jumped out, didn't even ask who we were, just said, pop the hood. He remembered now, vaguely, a scared girl in the back seat, pale, curled under a threadbare blanket. Her lips were blue. You fixed the van, handed the guy $20 for gas, gave me your coat, and told me to hang in there. Then you just disappeared. Jack leaned back, stunned. You remembered all that. She nodded. I held on to that moment like a lifeline. I kept that photo in every bag I carried, college jobs, even boardrooms. Not because I thought I'd find you, but because I needed to remember that good people exist. Jack exhaled slowly. It was strange. The kindness he'd all but forgotten had grown into something massive inside her. A moment to him. A foundation to her. "You didn't have to come find me," he said quietly. "But I did," she replied, "because that night gave me a reason to believe, and now I want to give others that same reason." He frowned. "What do you mean?" She pulled out a tablet, swiped through some files, then turned it toward him. A video began playing young men and women in navy jumpsuits welding, hammering, learning mechanical repair in a large, brightly lit space. At the end, a teenager, maybe 16, looked into the camera and said, "No one ever gave me a shot before. This place changed everything. It's called the Lift Project," Elena explained. "We take kids who've aged out of the system or have criminal records and teach them trades, real practical skills. We give them a chance when the world won't." Jack watched the footage silently, something shifting behind his eyes. "We're opening a new facility here," she said, "and I want you to be part of it." He blinked. "You want me to what?" "Be our lead mechanical advisor, design the program, train the kids, be the guy who gave me my first second chance for someone else." Jack looked at her as if she'd just handed him a grenade. He'd spent years avoiding entanglements, refusing to let himself believe he had anything left to offer anyone. But now... "I'm not a teacher," he said finally. "You don't have to be. Just be who you are. Show up. That's more than most ever do." He shook his head, slowly overwhelmed. "Why me?" She smiled, not out of flattery, but truth. "Because I looked for you for 20 years. And because if you could save me when I was no one, imagine what you could do now." Jack stared at the photo again. A man in the snow, a van, a girl who looked like she'd given up. He hadn't done anything extraordinary. He'd just stopped, reached out, acted like she mattered. And now she was here living proof that kindness echoes even if you forget the sound of your own voice. He didn't answer her that night, but for the first time in years, Jack Monroe walked out of the diner not feeling alone, but like the first domino in something much bigger than himself had just begun to fall. The next morning, Jack was back in his garage, his sanctuary. It smelled like motor oil and damp concrete, and sunlight filtered in through the half-open bay door in stripes. Tools hung on the wall like soldiers in formation, and the old radio in the corner mumbled out blues guitar barely loud enough to fill the space. He worked with focus, tuning the carburetor on a 1986 Bronco for a guy named Pete, who ran the local bait shop. It was the kind of job he could do with his eyes closed, the kind he preferred predictable, mechanical, not human. But even with the wrench in his hand, his mind drifted. Elena Whitmore. He didn't need the internet to know who she was. He remembered seeing her on the local news a few years back, smiling beside a line of kids in blue uniforms. Back then, he'd thought someone's doing something right. He hadn't realized she was the same girl from that snow-drifted night, or that she'd carried him of all people in her memory like some sort of talisman. Now, she wanted him involved. Not just as a name on a plaque, but in the thick of it, building something that mattered. "I'm not that guy." Jack muttered to no one. He tightened the last bolt and wiped his hands. Just then, a knock echoed against the metal door. Elena stood there, trench coat gone, replaced by jeans and a zip-up fleece, her hair pulled back. She looked more like a neighbor than a philanthropist. "Hope I'm not interrupting," she said with a soft smile. Jack gave her a look. "This is technically trespassing." She smirked. "Technically, I brought coffee. Does that earn me 5 minutes?" Jack hesitated, then stepped aside. "Only if it's black." She handed him a tall paper cup. "1 cream, no sugar. It's how you took it at the diner. I guessed it wasn't a first-time order." Jack raised an eyebrow but said nothing. They sat on 2 overturned buckets near the Bronco, the kind of makeshift setup that always said more about a man than his words. "This is nice," she said, looking around. "Quiet. I built it to be. That sounds lonely." "Lonely isn't always bad." There was a pause. Then Elena said, "You've done this a long time, haven't you?" Jack nodded. "Worked for commercial aviation in Detroit. Quit about a decade ago." Why, he took a sip. The coffee was decent. Life got noisy. I needed something I could fix with my hands. He didn't elaborate. He didn't need to. Elena sensed it the way someone who's been through their own storms can recognize the weight others carry. I know you think I came here just to say thanks, she said gently, but that's only part of it. Jack watched her guarded but curious. There are kids out there. Jack brilliant, capable, and one bad break away from disappearing into the system. Most people don't see them. Or worse, they pretend not to. I've met a few, Jack said. They come around here sometimes, ask if I need help. Most just want to feel useful. Exactly, she said, eyes lighting up. That's where you come in? Not as a symbol, as a mentor. A man who knows what it means to be overlooked and still get up and do the work anyway. Jack let out a breath. I'm no role model. Neither was the man who stopped in the snow. He just showed up. That was enough. Silence settled between them. Then Elena reached into her bag and pulled out a folded brochure. The cover read The Lift Project, Willeridge Initiative. Inside were photos of a half-renovated warehouse space concept, sketches of training bays for welding, auto repair, basic aviation maintenance. Below that, a roster of open positions: program architect, mechanical instructor, shop safety advisor. We'll pay you, she added. It's not charity. Jack chuckled dryly. Didn't think it was. You'll have full creative input. You build it your way. No red tape. That got his attention. His way. Not someone else's vision. Not someone else's hands tied by bureaucracy. That kind of trust didn't come easy. Can I think about it? Of course, but don't take too long. She stood, brushing imaginary dust from her jeans. Then, turning at the doorway, she added, I'm not trying to pull you out of your cave, Jack. But there's a world out there that still needs people like you, whether you believe it or not. And with that, she left. That night, Jack stood on the porch of his small house behind the garage. The wind stirred the pine trees and the stars blinked through the thin clouds like old friends. He held the brochure in one hand and the photo Elena had left in the other. The picture, that frozen moment in the snow, was grainy, but there was something in the eyes of the young man in it. Hope, resilience. Maybe just fatigue. But now, decades later, the girl from that photo had come back not broken, but blooming. And she wanted others to bloom, too. Jack wasn't sure if he was ready. But something in his chest, the place he'd locked away after losing touch with his daughter after years of solitude, was stirring. Not loudly, just enough to remind him he was still alive, still useful, still seen, and maybe, just maybe, ready to say yes, even if he didn't know what that yes would cost. 2 days passed. Jack didn't call, didn't text. He spent the time in his garage fixing things that didn't need fixing. The Bronco ran fine now, but he kept tuning it anyway. The small engine on his workbench, an old Continental piston he'd salvaged from a crop duster, was already restored, but he disassembled and cleaned it again like he was trying to polish hesitation out of his own bones. Outside, the sun stretched longer across the sky, and kids biked past on their way home from school. Jack caught himself watching them through the bay door. They laughed, loud, reckless, full of a kind of hope he didn't trust. He told himself he was too old for this, too far gone. Teaching a bunch of kids with rap sheets and broken homes, he wasn't a mentor. He barely knew how to talk to people anymore. Still, Elena's words echoed. There's a world out there that still needs people like you. That evening, his phone buzzed. A text. Unknown number. Elena, I'm heading to the site tomorrow morning. Come see it. No pressure. Just a walkthrough. 10 a.m. 10:20 Rosewood. Jack stared at the screen for a long time. Then he set his alarm. The next morning, he stood in front of a half-renovated warehouse tucked between a bus depot and a shuttered tire shop. The paint on the outside was chipped, the sign crooked. But through the open bay door, morning light spilled across concrete floors, high ceilings, steel beams. The bones were good. Inside, a few workers were installing ventilation ducts while others unwrapped crates labeled donated equipment. Jack spotted welding rigs, a torn-down engine block tool cabinets with brand-new locks. Elena stood near the center clipboard in hand, talking to a man in a flannel shirt and hard hat. She turned as Jack approached, eyes lighting up with something between surprise and relief. "You came," she said. "Figured I owed you a look," Jack replied, hands in his jacket pockets. She didn't push, just handed him a pair of safety glasses. "Let me give you the tour." They walked through the cavernous space, her voice clear and confident. "This bay will be for basic engine work. Over there, welding and fabrication. That side wall will be classrooms, small groups, hands-on." She pointed to the far end. "That office will be yours, if you take the job." Jack raised an eyebrow. "You've already built me an office." She smiled. "I believe in preparedness and optimism." They reached the back wall where a set of lockers lined the corridor. Names were taped on them already: Luis, Kayla, Jordan. Jack traced one with his fingertip. "Your first batch?" he asked. Elena nodded. "We start in 3 weeks. 12 kids all vetted through community programs. Some with records, most with trauma, none with stable homes." Jack looked up. "You're throwing them into vocational training. We're giving them structure, purpose. They'll have counselors, mentors, a stipend, and people who don't quit on them after the first mistake." He leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "And you think I'm that kind of person?" Elena hesitated, then said softly, "I think you're the kind of person who helped a stranger in a snowstorm and didn't ask for anything in return. That's exactly who they need." Jack studied her. "This isn't going to be clean. Kids like that, they test you. Push buttons you didn't know you had. Some will leave, some will lie. You ready for that? I am. Are you?" That question hit him like a gear slipping out of place. He'd built walls around himself for years. After the divorce, after his daughter left and never looked back, after realizing that fixing machines was easier than fixing people. But now the wall felt more like a cage, and Elena had just handed him the key. He didn't say yes, but he didn't walk out either. Later that day, Elena led Jack to a break room still under construction. It had folding chairs, a dusty coffee maker, and a whiteboard with scribbled notes: mentorship days, Tuesdays, Thursdays, career talks, check-ins, first aid certs. She poured coffee from a thermos and handed him a cup. "Do you have kids, Jack?" she asked gently. He hesitated, then nodded once. "A daughter, Olivia. Haven't seen her in almost 20 years. She waited. She was 9 when I left Detroit. Her mother and well, we didn't agree on much. I gave up trying to win in court. Figured I'd just make it worse by fighting. And you haven't tried since Jack's voice dropped. I don't even know where she is now." Elena looked at him for a long moment, then said, "Then maybe this isn't just about helping others. Maybe it's about helping you too." Jack scoffed. "You think teaching some kids will make up for missing my own no? I think showing up for them might remind you how much you still have to give." She stood, collected her things, and left him alone with the quiet. That evening, Jack returned to the site. He brought no tools, no application, just himself. He walked the bays again, this time alone, touched the cold steel of the engine blocks, imagined voices echoing here, laughter, frustration, progress. At the far wall, someone had spray-painted a phrase half-finished: "Build what they said you couldn't." He stood in front of it for a long time. Then he walked to the lockers, pulled a pen from his pocket, and above the name Luis he wrote, "Tomorrow starts here." He didn't say it out loud, but inside he knew yes. The first day at the lift project began not with celebration, but with smoke. Jack arrived early. The warehouse still smelled like new paint and fresh ambition. Outside sunlight cut through the mist like high beams glinting off the rows of donated cars and stripped-down engines. He rolled up his sleeves and adjusted the collar on his worn denim shirt. No logos, no title, just a patch from a long-defunct airline sewn over the breast pocket. The students arrived in staggered clumps, 12 of them most, with slouched shoulders and faces hardened by instinct. Boys and girls from different corners of town, different colors, different tempers. Some looked curious. Others looked already half gone. Jack watched them silently from the bay doorway, taking mental notes. One kid, Luis, hung back near the wall, arms crossed hoodie up despite the heat. His eyes darted like someone used to watching exits. Elena greeted the group from center floor, her voice calm but clear. "This space is yours now. You belong here. No one's here to save you. You're here to build your own future. And you're not alone anymore." Jack stepped forward when she motioned to him. "This is Jack Monroe. He's the one you'll be working with most days. You break something, he'll show you how to fix it. You fix something, he'll show you how to make it better." Jack eyed the group, expression unreadable. Then he simply said, "Show up, stay sharp, ask questions. That's all I need from you. No grand speech, just what mattered." 3 hours later, the shop floor buzzed with life. Wrenches clinked, engines coughed. The overhead fans turned slow and steady. Luis stood near a bench, turning a socket wrench in his hand like it was a foreign object. Jack approached him casually. "Chevy V8, 1992. Ever seen one stripped?" Luis shrugged. "Seen one in flames?" Jack nodded. "Fair, but this one's not going to bite." He handed the kid a shop towel. Luis didn't smile, but he didn't walk away either. Progress. Around noon, a piercing alarm blared through the warehouse. Strobe lights flashed overhead, red and jarring. Elena ran in from the hallway. "It's the scheduled fire drill," she said, raising her voice. "Everyone to the south exit now." Jack waved his arm. "Let's go. Leave tools, move fast, single file." The students shuffled toward the exit, a few laughing, a few rolling their eyes. But Luis froze. He stood in place, rigid as if the sound had paralyzed him. Jack noticed immediately and turned back. "Luis." The kid's eyes were wide, breath shallow. He was trembling. "Luis," Jack said firmly, stepping close. "It's a drill, not a real fire. You're safe. Can you hear me?" Luis's mouth opened, but no sound came out. His hand clutched the work table, knuckles white. Flashback. Jack knew the signs. Panic. Trauma triggered by the alarm, the noise, the chaos. He didn't touch him. Didn't shout. Just knelt slightly to eye level. "You're not where you were. You're here. Right now. Look around. Steel engines, nothing's burning. You're not alone." Luis's breath hitched. "Feel the floor under you. Solid concrete. That's what's real. This isn't then. It's now." Slowly, the panic receded from Luis's face. He nodded once, then followed Jack toward the exit, breathing hard but steady. Outside, the others stood in small circles, making jokes and kicking gravel. Elena saw Jack and Luis emerge and walked over. "Everything okay?" Jack nodded. He stayed. Luis shot him a quick glance, eyes dark with something like gratitude he didn't know how to express. Later in the break room, Elena handed Jack a bottle of water. "That could have gone very differently," she said quietly. Jack unscrewed the cap, leaned against the counter. "Kid's been through something. You could see it all over him. Most of them have. Some hide it better. You handled that well." Jack looked down at his hands, calloused, oil-stained, too used to metal and wires. He never thought they'd be used to steady a scared kid without touching a single bolt. "I didn't do much. You saw him. That's more than most adults ever did." She hesitated, then added, "You know, the first few months I was in the system, I flinched every time a door slammed. Took a year before I could sit with my back to a room." Jack looked at her. "You seem pretty steady now." She smiled. "I am. But only because someone once said 5 words that changed everything." "What were they?" "You're not broken. Just bruised." Jack absorbed that. It landed somewhere deeper than he expected. That night, Jack sat at his kitchen table with the lights dimmed and a notebook open. On the page were scribbled names: Luis Jordan, Kayla, Tanya, the kids in the program. Next to each name, he jotted notes. Not just skills, but who sat alone at lunch, who made others laugh, who asked for extra tools and who didn't speak at all. He didn't know if he'd make a difference. But today, he'd kept a kid from spiraling. Tomorrow, maybe he'd teach one how to rebuild a transmission, one bolt at a time, and just maybe somewhere between sockets and spark plugs they'd rebuild something even more important, a sense of self. Because today, a wall cracked. Not just Luis's, his own. The next week settled into a rhythm Jack hadn't felt in years and hadn't realized he missed. Mornings began with the rumble of garage doors rolling up, the clatter of wrenches, the buzz of grinders. The kids trickled in early sometimes, tired, sometimes irritable, always carrying more weight than tools. But Jack met them where they were, not with pep talks but with presence. He taught them to listen to machines. And in return they began slowly to listen to themselves. But on Thursday, just as Jack was cataloging a set of donated carburetors, Elena knocked lightly on the frame of his office door, holding something in her hand. "Got a minute?" Jack looked up, nodding. "Sure." She stepped in wearing her usual practical jeans and rolled sleeves, but her expression held a gravity he hadn't seen before. "I've been holding on to this," she said, offering a worn envelope. "It's yours, or at least, it was meant to be." Jack frowned, taking it gently. The paper had yellowed at the edges, the ink faded to a soft brown. His name was scribbled in shaky handwriting, Jack Monroe. No address, no return label. He turned it over. Unsealed. "Where did you get this?" "I wrote it. Years ago. After I tracked you down to Detroit." Jack blinked. "You tracked me down." "I tried," she said softly. "After I graduated, after I built the first version of the lift project, I felt this need to close the circle. To thank you properly. I wanted to tell you how much that one act had meant." She paused. "I found someone who knew your name. A woman. She said you were gone, that it was better not to stir the past." Jack's stomach turned cold. He didn't ask who the woman was. He already knew. His ex-wife had always been good at locking doors once they were shut. "So I wrote that letter anyway. But I had nowhere to send it." Jack unfolded the single sheet inside. The handwriting was unmistakably younger, more earnest. "Dear Jack, you probably don't remember me, but I remember you. You stopped your truck in the snow when no one else would. You fixed a van. You gave me your coat. And for the first time I felt like someone thought I mattered. I don't know if you ever wondered what became of that girl in the back seat, but she made it. She got out. She made something of herself, because you helped her believe she could. If you're reading this, it means I've found you, and I just wanted to say, thank you. You saved more than an engine that night. You saved me." Elena Jack's eyes didn't blur easily. He'd trained them not to, but halfway through that letter he had to fold it shut. "I didn't think it would matter," he said hoarsely. "Back then it was just instinct. Help the girl, fix the van, get back on the road. But it mattered to me." Elena sat across from him, elbows resting gently on the desk. "You said something once, that you're not a teacher, that you're not someone who inspires." She tilted her head. "But this place, these kids, they wouldn't be here if you hadn't pulled over on a snow-covered road 29 years ago." Jack shook his head slowly. "I didn't build this." "No," Elena said, "but you lit the match. I just carried the flame." They sat in silence for a moment, the sound of students hammering in the background like a heartbeat. Then Jack said, "I used to wonder if the best parts of me were already behind me." Elena smiled, gentle and steady. "They're not." Later that day, Jack found himself in the classroom watching Luis work alongside 2 other students. The kid was tightening a drive belt with more care than he'd shown all week. Jack didn't interrupt. He just watched, observed. The tension in Luis's shoulders had softened. Progress. Across the bay, Jordan, a wiry, sharp-eyed girl who rarely spoke, called out from the engine hoist. "Mr. Monroe, is it true you worked on 737s?" Jack raised an eyebrow. "Where'd you hear that Luis said you used to work commercial?" That you were like a lead mechanic or something." Jack chuckled. "Something like that? Then how come you ended up here?" she asked. The question was sharp, but not unkind. Jack answered honestly. "Because I spent too long fixing things that didn't matter, and then I met someone who reminded me that people do." Jordan didn't respond right away. Then she nodded. "That's cool." She turned back to her engine. Jack smiled faintly. That night at home, Jack sat at the kitchen table again. The letter from Elena rested beside a photo he'd pulled from a dusty drawer, a picture of Olivia, his daughter, on her 9th birthday. Pigtails, cake smeared on her cheek, his arm around her shoulder. He hadn't thought about her in a long time without pain, but now it came with something new, a question. Does she remember me? Does she wonder where I am? Jack took out a clean envelope. For the first time in years, he began writing not because he had to, but because he wanted to. Back at the lift project the next morning, Jack pinned Elena's letter to the inside wall of his office behind a laminated sign that read, "One act of kindness can echo for decades." He didn't need to display it publicly, but he wanted to remember. Because sometimes the things you think are lost are just waiting for the right person to find them again. The following weekend, Jack stood at the edge of the hospital parking lot, engine still running, fingers gripping the wheel tighter than they should. The old GMC truck idled beside a white-striped curb marked "Emergency Drop-Off Only," but Jack wasn't here for any emergencies unless you counted the one pounding in his chest. He'd driven nearly 2 hours to get here, not because he had to, because he couldn't not anymore. In his back pocket was a note folded 3 times, worn along the crease with a name and a hospital unit number, Olivia Monroe. RN Cardiac ICU, 4th floor. His daughter. He hadn't spoken her name aloud in nearly 20 years. The information had come from Elena, gently, quietly, after she followed a thread from a nursing award photo Olivia had appeared in online. She hadn't pushed. She simply said, "She's not far," and then handed him the name, the address, the choice. Now he was here. And frozen. Jack stepped out of the truck eventually. The sun had climbed high, casting sharp shadows across the lot, but the wind had a lingering chill, the kind that always reminded him of things unfinished. Inside the lobby was modern, sterile, but not cold. A volunteer offered to direct him, but he shook his head and took the elevator alone. 4th floor. He stepped out into the hallway and found himself facing a nurse's station bustling with quiet urgency. He scanned the space. 2 nurses passed him, then a third blonde, mid-20s, maybe early 30s, clipboard in hand, listening to a colleague. Jack's breath caught. She was taller than he remembered, her face leaner, more defined. But the tilt of her head, the way her brow furrowed as she listened, that was all her mother. Her eyes, though, those were his. Olivia. He didn't move. He didn't speak. He just watched. And then he turned around and walked away. That night, Jack sat on the porch steps of his house, the sky glowing violet as dusk fell. He held a mug of coffee he hadn't touched in 10 minutes. Elena's voice played on repeat in his head. You don't have to fix it all at once, but you have to stop pretending it doesn't matter. She was right, and wrong. It mattered. But maybe that was what scared him most. He was still holding the photo of Olivia as a child, the one with her birthday cake and chocolate frosting across her chin. He remembered how she'd laughed when he pretended to be a robot and sang the birthday song in a mechanical voice. He remembered how tight she hugged him. And then the divorce, the custody battles, the long goodbye that wasn't said out loud, just signed into paper. He wondered if she remembered the last time she saw him. He wondered if she remembered at all. Jack stood, walked into the house, and sat at the small desk in his den. He turned on the lamp and pulled out a legal pad. He began to write. The next day at the lift project, Jack moved through the shop like a man with purpose. He was mid-demonstration with Kayla and Jordan, teaching them how to calibrate a torque wrench when Elena entered the bay with a visitor badge clipped to her blouse. She caught his eye and with a small nod motioned toward the break room. Jack excused himself and followed her in. Elena didn't speak right away. She closed the door behind her, then turned with an unreadable expression. "I hope it's okay I came unannounced." "Of course, you're always welcome here." She stepped forward, studying his face. "You went, didn't you?" Jack looked down, then nodded. "I saw her. From a distance. Did she see you?" "No." "Why not?" Jack exhaled slowly. "Because I was afraid the only thing she'd recognize was the part of me that left." Elena stepped closer. "Jack, she's a nurse, a caregiver, a woman who chose to help people for a living. That doesn't happen in a vacuum." Jack said nothing. She reached into her bag and held out a small envelope. Then led her to side. "What's this? I mailed your letter. I kept a copy, in case you didn't." Jack stared at the envelope, his name in his daughter's handwriting this time. Dad, and something stirred so deeply inside him it felt like grief and hope tangled into one. "You didn't have to do that, I know," she said. "But you've spent long enough being afraid of what you might find. I thought maybe it was time to let yourself be found." That afternoon, Jack went back to the classroom. Luis was at the back bench tinkering with a brake caliper, more focused than usual. Kayla was helping a younger student adjust their lift jack. He watched them with quiet pride. These kids didn't know his whole story, but they didn't have to. They saw him now, present, dependable, real. The rest would come if and when it needed to. Later that evening, Jack opened the envelope. Inside was a folded page, short, simple. Olivia's handwriting. "Dad, I don't know what to say. I didn't expect this. I've thought about you more than I ever admitted to anyone. I was angry for a long time, then sad, then numb. But I'm not any of those things now. I'm curious. Would you, maybe, like to meet for coffee? I'm free next Thursday morning." Olivia Jack folded the letter carefully and placed it on the table. Then he exhaled, long, slow, steady. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was a door. And this time he didn't plan to walk away. Rain had been teasing Willowridge all afternoon, long stretches of heavy clouds and a stubborn drizzle that smeared the windows of the lift project's training bays. Jack had always loved the smell of rain on hot concrete. It reminded him of airfields of motion and pause at once. But today it reminded him of something else, fragility. He glanced up from the open hood of a '98 Camry and listened. The students were quieter than usual, the way people get when storms are near, when thunder hums low like a warning in the gut. At the far end of the shop, Luis was wiping down a spark plug tray. He'd come early. Again. Jack had noticed a change in him these past few days, subtle but steady. He asked more questions, checked torque settings twice, even stayed late to sweep up once. Trust Jack knew never landed all at once. It came in pieces. He didn't mention it. He just let the boy work. The thunder broke shortly before 3 p.m. A sharp cracking sound followed by a growl that rolled through the tin roof like a distant engine misfiring. Elena appeared at the doorway, umbrella dripping clipboard under her arm. "We've got a watch in effect," she said. "Local cells moving in fast, heavy wind, short bursts of hail. I've told the team to shut everything down by 4. Jack nodded. "Got it. We'll start wrapping now." But just as he turned to round up the students, a shout rang out across the parking lot. "Hey! Hey!" Jack and Elena rushed to the edge of the bay and saw Luis, soaked and breathless, running toward them from the side gate. "Tire shop, next door," he panted. "One of your delivery vans had rolled into the back alley. Some idiot left it in neutral. It's stuck and the water's rising fast." Jack didn't wait. He grabbed his jacket, shouted to Elena to keep everyone inside, and followed Luis through the downpour. The alley was already ankle-deep in runoff. Sheets of rain blurred the lines of everything, and there wedged against a sloped embankment sat the lift project's delivery van, half-tilted tires spinning uselessly in place. "Why were you even over here?" Jack called through the storm. "I was taking a shortcut home," Luis yelled back, "and I saw it roll. Thought it was some junker till I saw the logo." The boy's face was pale but focused. Jack could see it. The panic, the instinct to run, and the decision not to. "You did good," Jack said firmly. Now stay clear." Jack waded toward the van, the water swirling faster now. The rear wheels had sunk halfway into mud. One good heave might flip it if the axle slipped. He checked the front cab, empty, thank God. But the keys were gone. He needed traction and weight. He motioned for Luis. "Grab those sandbags by the fence. Stack 'em behind the rear tires." Fast Luis hesitated for half a second, then nodded and bolted. Jack climbed into the driver's seat. The engine wouldn't start flooded. He popped it into neutral and shouted, "Push on 3." Together soaked to the bone man, and boy leaned into the storm. 1, 2, 3. The van groaned, then inched forward with a sucking sound, wheels breaking free of the mud. Again, another heave, another foot of progress. The water sloshed around their knees now. Finally, the van cleared the slope and rolled to level ground. Jack threw on the emergency brake and stepped back, panting. Luis stood hunched nearby, chest-heaving, hair plastered to his forehead. "That was insane," he said between breaths. "We could have flipped it." "Yeah," Jack replied, catching his own breath. "But we didn't." "I didn't know I could do that," Luis admitted. Jack looked at him, really looked at him. "Now you do." Back at the shop, Elena had towels and blankets ready. The power had been cut as a precaution, and students sat in a circle with flashlights and half-eaten vending machine snacks. Jack and Luis entered like survivors from a different world, dripping but alive. Elena's eyes widened. "You ran into that storm." "Not alone," Jack said, patting Luis's shoulder. "Kid here made the call." Luis flushed, looking down. "We'll talk about judgment later," Elena said, hands on hips. "But thank you." She glanced at Jack. "You okay?" He nodded. Been through worse, and he had. But something about today felt different. Later that night, the storm passed. The parking lot glittered with puddles, and the air smelled like ozone and second chances. Jack lingered by the bay doors long after everyone had gone. Elena joined him with 2 mugs of coffee. "You ever notice," she said, "that it takes a storm to remind us what we're made of?" Jack took the cup and nodded. "Luis stepped up today," she added. "But he followed someone who didn't run." Jack didn't respond at first. Then he said, "That boy's been waiting his whole life to be told he could handle something. And now he knows." They stood in silence for a moment, watching the clouds break apart to reveal a sliver of moonlight. Jack sipped his coffee and added almost absently, "Funny thing is, I think I needed to know it too." Elena smiled. Then maybe the storm did its job. Jack looked out at the quiet night. "Yeah," he murmured. "Maybe it did." By the time Monday came, the storm was only a memory, though the ground behind the lift project still bore its muddy scars. Inside the warehouse, things returned to rhythm drills, hummed tools clanked, and the air was thick with the scent of steel and oil. But for Jack, something had shifted. It wasn't the storm that changed him, it was the boy who didn't flinch inside it. Luis had walked into the shop that morning, not as the quiet kid with his hood pulled low but with his sleeves rolled up, asking what engine they'd take apart next. Jack gave him a nod that said everything he needed to, "You earned this." But just as he began reviewing a new wiring diagram with Kayla, a voice called from the bay door. "Jack, you've got a visitor." It was one of the volunteers from the front office holding up a cell phone. She asked for you by name, said it was important. Jack wiped his hands on a rag and approached. The phone felt oddly foreign in his palm, as if he were borrowing someone else's life. "Hello." The voice on the other end was soft, hesitant. "Hi. Is this Jack Monroe?" He froze. His throat tightened. "Yes, it's Olivia." Her name in his ear felt like hearing a song he hadn't dared hum in decades. I wasn't sure you'd answer," she continued. "I almost hung up." Jack stepped outside, heart pounding. The autumn breeze carried the scent of turning leaves and diesel, a strangely comforting blend. "I'm glad you didn't," he managed. There was a pause. "Thank you for the letter," she said. "I read it more than once. I wasn't ready to reply right away. But then, I remembered your handwriting, and how you used to put little stars next to my name on school notes. Jack closed his eyes. He remembered those stars. A tiny ritual that had meant nothing to anyone but them. I didn't know if you'd want to hear from me, she said. I've wanted to for a long time, Jack said, voice steady now. I just didn't think I deserved to. Maybe we both spent too long trying to outrun the silence. A long breath passed between them, not awkward, not strained. Just full. Would you like to meet? She asked. Jack leaned against the steel frame of the bay. Yes, he said without hesitation. I would. Thursday morning. There's a diner near the hospital. Nothing fancy. But they've got good coffee. That's more than enough. Okay, I'll see you then. Olivia, he said before she could hang up. Yeah, thank you for calling. Thank you, she replied, for still being someone I could call. Jack stood there long after the line went dead. The warehouse buzzed behind him, but he was somewhere else entirely in a kitchen 20 years ago, helping a little girl pour pancake batter into a skillet shaped like stars. She hadn't slammed the door back then. She'd just gone quiet. Now maybe they were finally ready to speak again. That evening, Elena found Jack in the staff break room staring out the window with a half-drunk cup of coffee. You look like you just got back from somewhere far, she said, sliding into the seat across from him. Maybe I did. He told her about the call, about the diner, about how Olivia still remembered his stars. Elena smiled. You're walking into something good, Jack. He didn't answer right away. Then I'm scared. Not of seeing her, but of realizing how much time I've missed. Then don't miss what's left. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small object wrapped in a napkin. I've been holding this for a moment like now. Inside was a key brass worn engraved with Unit B, Tool Room. It's the only room we haven't finished. I wanted you to decide what goes in there. It's yours. Jack turned the key over in his palm. Why me? Because this whole place runs on what you've given skill steadiness presence. She paused. And maybe because I know what it's like to hope someone shows up. And what it means when they do. Jack looked at her, really looked at her, and saw not just the woman who had once been the girl in the snow, but someone who had made showing up her entire life's mission. Thank you, he said simply. For what? For reminding me who I still am. Later that night, back home, Jack sat at his kitchen table, the room dim, except for the small desk lamp beside him. He took a worn envelope from a drawer, Elena's first letter, and laid it beside Olivia's. 2 lives, 2 women. One he had saved without knowing. One he had lost and now had the chance to find again. Both had brought him back to himself. Outside, the wind moved through the trees like a voice, gentle, insistent. And Jack, for the first time in years, felt ready to listen. Thursday came with the kind of crisp, clear morning that made everything feel sharper, colors, more vivid air, more honest. Jack stood outside the little diner Olivia had chosen, hands shoved deep into the pockets of his flannel jacket heart, thudding like an overworked engine. He'd been here for 10 minutes, maybe 15, long enough to consider walking away twice. Then the door chimed. Olivia stepped out. She wore navy scrubs beneath a pea coat, her ID badge clipped at her hip. Her hair was tied back loosely, but her face, her eyes carried the same quiet intensity she had as a child. Jack froze. So did she. For one long breath, they just stood there, 2 people on the edge of something fragile. Then she smiled. You came, she said. Jack cleared his throat. So did you. They sat near the window, sunlight spilling across the formica table like something sacred. Neither rushed. They talked. About safe things at first, her job at the hospital, the night shifts, the stubborn patients. Jack shared a little about the lift project, the kids, the tools, the muddy alley with the runaway van. Then came the silence, and the questions buried beneath it. Why didn't you come back? Olivia asked, finally not accusing, just asking. Jack looked down at his coffee. Because I thought I'd only make it worse. Your mom didn't want me around. And I I didn't think I had the right to fight anymore." She nodded slowly. "I waited a long time, Dad. At first I thought maybe you'd just show up at school one day. Then later, I figured, maybe you forgot." "I never forgot," Jack said, voice low. "Not one day." He reached into his coat and pulled out the folded photo, the one of her at age 9, chocolate frosting on her cheeks. He placed it gently on the table between them. "I carried this with me through everything. I just didn't know how to carry it to you." Olivia looked at the picture for a long time. Then she looked at him. "I think I wanted you to be perfect for a long time. But now I just want you to be here." Jack felt something release inside him, a valve, maybe, or a lifetime of pressure bleeding off quietly. "I can do that," he said, "if you'll have me." She nodded. "I'd like that." 2 weeks later, the Lift Project's main auditorium buzzed with energy. The grand opening had finally arrived. Community leaders, donors, parents, and students all gathered beneath the tall industrial lights strung with soft, warm bulbs. Folding chairs lined the center space facing a makeshift stage made from reclaimed wood. Jack had been roped into wearing a button-down shirt, clean jeans, and against his preference shoes that didn't have oil stains. Elena stood at the podium, composed but radiant. "This building," she said into the mic, "was once just concrete and echo. Now it's a space for rebuilding not just engines or careers, but lives." She glanced toward Jack in the front row. "And there's someone here who understands that better than anyone." Jack shifted in his seat, uncomfortable but moved. "This man fixed my van when I was a lost kid. Gave me his coat. Never asked for thanks. He forgot the moment I never did. Because that one act gave me the idea that people, no matter how broken they seem, can still show up for others." The audience quieted. Today, he doesn't just fix machines. He helps young people fix what they thought couldn't be repaired in their hands and in their hearts. She stepped aside. "Please welcome Jack Monroe." Applause filled the room like thunder. Jack walked slowly to the mic, rubbing the back of his neck. He hated speeches. But somehow, this didn't feel like one. It felt like standing in the middle of something real, a moment made from threads woven long before he realized he'd been sewing anything. "I don't do well with microphones," he began. "I prefer carburetors and torque wrenches. But I know what it means to feel like you're too far gone to start over. And I know what it means when someone proves you wrong." He looked at the students. Luis caught his eye, seated next to Kayla, jaw set, proud, and fighting it. "You all are proof. You showed up. You did the work. And you keep showing up. That's all anyone can ask." He stepped away from the podium. People clapped again, but quieter, as if honoring something deeper than applause. And then, just before he could sit, a voice rose from the side of the stage. "Excuse me," Olivia said, stepping forward. "Can I say something?" She wore a navy blouse and simple slacks, her hospital ID still clipped to her hip. Jack's eyes widened. She took the mic with a smile that carried both courage and trembling. "I didn't come here today to speak. I came to listen. But then I realized I needed to say something I've never had the chance to." She turned toward Jack. "You didn't just save one girl all those years ago. You saved 2. The room stilled. Me and her. The one in the snow. And I want you to know I'm proud to be your daughter." Jack didn't move. Couldn't. Tears burned behind his eyes as the applause rose again, but softer, reverent, the kind reserved for homecomings. Olivia stepped off the stage, walked toward him, and wrapped her arms around his chest like she had when she was a child. Only this time he held on longer. That night, after everyone had gone, Jack stood in the bay alone. Lights dimmed the place quiet again. Elena joined him, a soft smile on her face. "Well," she said, "that was one hell of a moment." Jack nodded, eyes still damp. "I didn't know what to say when she came up there." "You didn't have to. She said it all." They stood in silence for a while. Then Jack said, "You know, I used to think redemption was for other people, the ones who didn't mess things up beyond repair. Elena placed a hand gently on his arm. And now I think, maybe all it takes is showing up. She smiled. Told you so. And for once, Jack didn't argue. 2 weeks after the auditorium ceremony, the sound of compressed air tools and laughter filled the bays of the lift project like a living pulse. The walls, once echo chambers of concrete and uncertainty, now held memories not just of engines fixed or welding sparks, but of moments. Moments of trust built. Moments of walls lowered. Moments of people young and old coming back to themselves. Jack moved through the shop like a man who'd always belonged there, though it had taken him half a lifetime to arrive. He didn't bark instructions the way some instructors did. He showed. He guided. And sometimes he just stood nearby, hands folded, letting the kids figure things out on their own. Luis was the first to complete the entry-level certification program. The moment was marked not by speeches or banners, but with a simple moment at Jack's workbench. Jack handed the boy a small silver socket wrench, new gleaming. "Your first real one," he said. "Not a loaner. It's yours now." Luis looked at it unsure. "I don't have to give it back." Jack shook his head. "You earned it. Just one rule. What's that? You help someone else earn theirs." Luis didn't say anything, but his grip on the wrench tightened and he nodded, sharp, determined. Jack saw the promise behind it. At the far end of the garage, Kayla was guiding a new recruit, a wiry 15-year-old named Marcus, through the disassembly of a lawnmower engine. Jack watched quietly. A few months ago, Kayla barely made eye contact. Now she taught with quiet confidence, adjusting Marcus's grip and pointing out torque specs without hesitation. This, more than any trophy, was what the lift project had always meant to be. Jack spent his afternoons helping the students convert an old storage room into a communal space. It was dusty and cramped, but the kids insisted it could be more. So they painted the walls a warm sand color. They built benches from scrap wood and brought in books, a second-hand mini-fridge, and even a used coffee machine donated by a retired mechanic down the road. They named it the Pit Stop, a place to recharge. One afternoon, Jack hung a corkboard on the back wall. On it, he pinned photos. A snapshot of Luis beside the delivery van he helped recover. Jordan welding her first clean seam. A group picture from the grand opening, Jack standing beside Olivia, both laughing mid-sentence. Elena walked in as he was pinning one more photo of the original crew with Day 1 scrawled on the bottom corner. "It's starting to look like a real history wall," she said. Jack nodded. "It is." She stepped closer, tilting her head toward the final photo. "You thinking about what comes next?" He paused. "Actually, yeah." She raised an eyebrow. "Tell me." Jack gestured around the space. "I've been thinking about setting up a peer mentorship structure. Let the older students lead shop sessions. Give them the floor." Elena's eyes brightened. "That's exactly what I hoped would happen. Also, thinking about expanding, we've got more applications than space." She laughed. "You're starting to sound like a founder." Jack smirked. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves." "Too late," she said, handing him a sealed envelope. He opened it. Inside was a printed letter on Lift Project letterhead. It read, "We hereby appoint Jack Monroe as lead program developer. Mechanical Division, with full authority to shape and expand the curriculum in accordance with our mission to empower underserved youth with skills, confidence, and second chances." Jack blinked, then looked up at her. "You serious? Dead serious? I thought you already made me that. You were acting like one. Now it's official." He swallowed the emotion rising in his throat. "I don't have a fancy degree, Elena. I don't have letters after my name. You've got something better, a lifetime of lessons no classroom can teach. And a room full of kids who'd follow you anywhere." Jack ran a hand through his hair. "Guess I better get used to making speeches." "Nah," she said with a grin. "Just keep doing what you've been doing, showing up." That weekend, Olivia returned for another visit. She brought homemade cornbread and a set of personalized shop aprons she'd had embroidered for the crew. Jack took her on a full tour this time, not as a visitor, but as someone introducing her to his world. She met Louise Kayla Jordan. She even helped Marcus patch up a busted chain on a bicycle someone had donated. The kids loved her, and Jack could tell Olivia lit up around them. Later that evening, as father and daughter sat on the back porch of Jack's house, she said quietly, "I didn't know how to picture you all those years, but now I see it." Jack turned to her. "See what you weren't gone. You were just waiting for the right place to be found again." Jack didn't speak. He just reached out and took her hand, and they sat like that as the stars emerged above the pines, soft, steady, silent. The next morning at the shop, Jack arrived early. He entered the tool room, the last room in the entire warehouse that still smelled like dust and rust. He placed a small plaque on the inside of the door. It read, "The rebuild room, for the pieces we thought we'd lost. For the hands that keep trying. For those who believe it's never too late." He stepped back, looked around the empty room, and smiled. Tomorrow the kids would start turning it into a machine lab. Today, it was just a quiet space full of potential. And for Jack Monroe, that was everything he needed to believe in what came next. The autumn air had turned crisp, the kind that made you pull your jacket a little tighter and breathe a little deeper. At Willowridge Regional Airport, the runway stretched long and quiet beneath a golden morning sky. It looked almost exactly the same as it had months ago, still gray, surrounded by pine trees on all sides. But everything was different now. Jack stood near the edge of the tarmac with Louise and Jordan by his side, both in Navy shop coats embroidered with Lift Project, Apprentice Crew. Between them sat a gleaming piece of equipment on a trailer, a fully restored Continental aircraft engine, vintage compact once forgotten in a salvage yard, now running like new. "Not bad for a team of rookies," Jack said, patting the engine's cowling with pride. Louise grinned. "Not bad for a guy who used to say, 'I don't teach.'" Jack chuckled. Yeah. The three of them turned as the hum of an approaching aircraft began to rise in the distance. A small charter plane emerged from the clouds and touched down smoothly, its wheels kicking up a faint mist from the still damp pavement. The Lift Project's logo shimmered subtly on its tail just beneath the co-branding of Whitmore Charitable Foundation. Jack hadn't known Elena would arrive this morning. She hadn't said she would, but of course she did. The cabin door opened and Elena stepped down the stairs wearing jeans boots and a soft cashmere sweater beneath her coat. Her auburn hair caught the sun and her face lit up the second she spotted Jack. She didn't hesitate. She walked straight to him. "You finished it," she said, eyeing the engine. "The kids did most of the work," Jack replied. "I just pointed at things." Louis snorted. "Sure," and welded half the frame at 11 p.m. with a flashlight in his mouth. Elena raised a brow. "That's the man I remember." Jack met her gaze. "I'm not sure I ever stopped being him. I think I just forgot." They stood in silence for a beat, the way people do when they don't need to fill the air with words. Behind them, Olivia pulled up in her car, honking lightly. She waved from the window, a to-go tray of coffees in hand. "Hope I'm not late to the party," she called. Jack grinned and turned to Louise and Jordan. "Go grab those from her, would you, and make sure she doesn't trip. She thinks she's a ninja." The kids jogged off laughing. Elena moved a little closer. "You know," she said, "the board's been asking about expansion. We're getting calls from 3 different cities wanting to replicate the program." Jack raised an eyebrow. "You telling me we're going national now? I'm saying people notice when something works, when something heals." He considered that, then looked out across the runway, the same strip of pavement where his life had quietly turned a corner. "This all started right here," he said. "Me, crawling under a jet. I had no business fixing that fast. You, stepping out like you knew me from another lifetime." Elena's voice was soft. "I did. In a way, I did." Jack looked at her and something in his chest settled like a gear finally catching. "You found me," he said. She smiled. "You let yourself be found." He reached out and took her hand, not like a grand gesture, but something quieter. Something earned. "I've been thinking," he said. That workshop we've been building with the kids is starting to look a little like that van I fixed all those years ago." "How so? It doesn't look like much to someone passing by, but to the ones inside, it's salvation." Elena nodded. "Then maybe we keep building vans?" "Jack, for everyone who still needs a ride out of the cold." He smiled. "Deal." Later that evening, as the sun dipped low and washed the sky in amber, Jack sat at his workbench back at the lift project. The bays were quiet now, the tools hung neatly in their places, the echoes replaced by the soft hum of possibility. He opened the drawer beneath the bench and pulled out 2 envelopes, one labeled Elena, one Olivia. Inside each was a photo. The same one. Jack, decades younger, kneeling beside a van in the snow. A teenage girl looking over her shoulder, eyes wide with hope. He added a small note to both in handwriting, a little worn but still steady. "Don't forget, what looks like a small moment might be someone else's turning point. Show up. Always." The next morning, Jack found himself standing in front of a new group of students. Fresh faces, uncertain eyes, sleeves too long, laces untied. He took a breath, then began. "Welcome to the Lift Project," he said. "This is where we rebuild machines. But more importantly, this is where we rebuild people." He saw a few eyebrows rise. One kid stifled a scoff. Jack just smiled. "Some of you are here because no one else gave you a chance. Some of you are here because you still don't believe in second chances. But here's the truth, I didn't believe either. Until someone reminded me that kindness isn't about rescue. It's about remembering someone matters." He paused. "So if no one's ever said it to you, let me be the first. You matter. You belong here. And you're not alone anymore." The room went still. Then someone clapped. Then another. And slowly the sound swelled, not polite, but honest. The kind of applause that meant we hear you. Jack turned to the wall where a new photo now hung, Olivia standing beside Luis, both laughing, grease on their cheeks. Beneath it, a handwritten sign, repaired, restored, reborn. And in that moment, Jack knew he hadn't just built a workshop. He'd built a legacy, a sanctuary, a home, and this time he wasn't leaving. Not ever again. We'd love to know where are you watching from. Drop your city or country in the comments below and tell us what part of the story touched you the most. If you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss any of our future heartwarming stories. Thank you for watching and for being part of this community that believes in kindness, second chances, and the quiet power of showing up.